%80 of process management people say we do process management because we have an IT department. A process is not IT. A process, if you see the big maps on the wall of this is a process, IT, that is a very static picture of what you would like it to be. A process is with people interacting in it. So many people do misunderstand what business process is and they think of IT. Secondly, you often see that very well paid people like me, when they talk about the process, at best they come from at the process and the sub-process level. They have no clue what's happening on activity level and on structure level. How many managers make deals about business process outsourcing or process standardization and having no clue what's happening on the shop floor? Because on the shop floor, there the interaction between departments and between companies and what have you takes place. And there it is, you know, that the real action takes place.
I don't think that the business that we are in, services and financial services, is traditionally a place where processes are a focus point. I think it's primarily the industry where processes have a lot more focus. But it's changing now, but it's not changing very rapidly.
Process performance has grown over the last several years. I remember 5-6 years ago going to a BPM, Business Process Management Conference, and most people couldn't spell process. But it's starting to get out there and organisations understand it, but it's got a long way to go. Most organisations think of process improvement as simply being improving bank withdrawals or deposits or an insurance company claim. It's not just about that. It's about expanding it into management processes, decision making and so forth. You mentioned process performance. Most organisations in fact don't manage their processes. In fact, most organisations don't manage very well. You can only manage if you measure, and most organisations don't measure effectively.
Business process management is about connecting people. It's about connecting the silos of an organization. If you ask the people on the street, give me your emotion with the word process, I would predict that predominantly you get a neutral or even negative emotion. It's about Kafka's The Process. It's about solid concrete. It's about bureaucracy. Most examples in day-to-day life related to process talk about those examples. So if you're going to go to a boardroom and talk about BPM, I think a lot of these people who understand what BPM can do underestimate that the average board member has the same emotion and the same association as the man on the street.
And I think organisations need to start making more logical decision making rather than emotional. Intuition has always played a very large part and should continue to. However, if we relied on logic alone, CEOs around the world and senior executives would have done business process improvement because it's a bit of a no-brainer from a payback perspective, and yet they haven't. They haven't because I think often they perceive it as high risk or they simply don't understand it.
What strikes me is that if you make it very transparent how a process is running and people say, gosh, this is very complex. And what the natural tendency is to decomplex a very complex process by cutting it up. But by cutting it up, you make it even more complex. You know, people say, you know, an elephant is too big, you can't eat it in one bite, let's do it in a few bites. But if you cut an elephant up, it's not an elephant anymore. And what we are saying is, you know, embrace the complexity of the process. Do understand that you've built and you made your own complexity by trying to cut it up. Embrace it and then start simplifying it and reducing it and compressing it. That is the way. But don't cut up processes. But if you cut up process, you make it even more complex and your customer satisfaction goes down the drain.
Today, the average value chain has over 25 companies in it. So it's no longer streamlining what's going on inside of a company, it's streamlining the entire value chain. So what you're moving there from is not information processing, you're moving from information processing to commitment processing. Big different world. And what that does then is to bring some form of management and executive control over communications, over the thing we used to call collaboration. So a big frontier I see now is human interaction management.
When I first started with process re-engineering, there was the feeling that we could kind of clearly define work processes and that people would actually follow them. Now we know that knowledge workers don't want to do that, and even I think blue-collar workers in many cases have a difficult time with that. So my view is that we have to move toward other approaches to improving work than just laying out a clear structure. We have to have a whole range of approaches to improving how work gets done.
I think from my work and what I see in companies is the process flow and that view of looking at it, whether it's re-engineering or TQM or whatever it might be, it's a really effective vehicle to see how tasks accumulate to get things done. And so if you're just focused on the task basis and the output basis, it helps you see certain things that are definitely important. What I'm seeing more and more though is when we overlay networks across process mapping methodologies, it reveals all sorts of hidden inefficiencies that you just can't see through a process lens. And so you find, as an example, that there may be 4 or 5 people that nobody accounted for in the process mapping but turn out to be really central as decision makers and things that slow work down in different ways. Another thing that's real common for me to see is pre and post re-engineering effort. You'll find that the people that were good in the old environment suddenly are way overloaded in the new environment because they have all their old colleagues and new ones coming to them. And so that's another inefficiency that's built in that you can't see purely through a process lens. Now the network side has its own biases. It's just going to pick up people, interactions. So I think the magic really is in the combination at some point that organizations have got to be placing more emphasis on going forward.
So I think that the word process is already over the top for 2 reasons. Is one, more and more people start to look organizations as being complex and situational processes, that you need to say it any longer, you stress it any longer. And there are still people are looking towards process in the old-fashioned way, and they will disappear with this all kind of situations.
I would like to say that it is that we optimize by using tools like Six Sigma, and that's very important to us. But in the past 2 years we've learned a lot, and now I dare to say that the most important thing is behavior. 80% of the changes we make in our company is behavior of our people.
Another thing that we can do, of course, is to think about knowledge work processes. I think less, again, in a highly structured way, but more showing people what the process seems to be, taking a positive deviance approach to say, these people seem to be doing it better than you, providing some transparency into results and giving them the motivation to improve it themselves. That seems to be working in some areas of behavioral economics, and I think it'll work for knowledge work as well.
I look at the whole world of business as project at a time. It's called the Hollywood model. Hollywood used to have big studios and they owned everything. They owned the actors, they owned the studios, they did the financing. No more. Every new movie you see was just an IPO. Someone sold it, they bring together all the resources, financing separate, the production separate, the actors separate. The end of that movie is disbanded. So the world becomes a project.
We're more in the tradition of why, because organizing is something that just happens. It will just emerge. This kind of cooperation, this kind of organizations, if you still can call them organization, will emerge around situations. Okay. And not designed by somebody or some professional. You have to say, you need that many of those people, that many of those people, and there is a manager, and these are the tasks and responsibilities. That in fact never happened, but that was always the idea and the concept of the 20th century, that you should do that in that way.
Well, I've seen in the past 5 years what is the result if people make their own processes. And I come from the process industry, and in the process industry you really design your processes. I come from the chemical industry. Nobody in his right mind is going to, let's say, well, let's see if the naphtha cracker does it. We haven't designed the process, because you will have lots of clouds. So the process industry, certainly the chemical industry, is you design, do you design. I've seen in the service industry, and not only KPN but also industries, is that people develop the processes on the way. They tweak them on the way. They start small and it works, but it is with bucket and hose, and then they ramp up and then it collapses, and then they're going to tweak it again, repair it again. Imagine what that reparation costs in customer satisfaction and in cost of poor quality. So I'm not advocating that the service industry would go as far as the process industry in fully design, but make a few steps in direction of design and you will see that the process quality goes up enormously and that consumer satisfaction expressed in endearment will go miles high and your cost will go down.